Can you hear me? Geppetto's puppet. We need your help.
Let's talk about Pinocchio Souls. And don't worry, I'll discuss those reviews at some point. This is my first playthrough on the back of beating Elden Ring's DLC at level 1 with no scatter tree fragments. So I thought I was coming in primed and ready to make a hot mess. I knew coming in the parry system was more of a deflect, like Another Crab's Treasure or Sekiro. Fine with that. Both games had brilliant combat. That's about all I knew though. I kept myself away from spoilers, speedrun strats and all that sort of stuff, so this was a very raw first experience. One of the first things I do is pick a build. Now, I always go for speed, so dexterity, or in this case technique. I know I shouldn't, because normally in Souls-likes, the biggest sword wins. Here's looking at you, Dark Souls and Code Vein. I neck all the nearby puppets to figure out how to play the game. Starting in a train station is a smart move, very Max Payne. Approaching the station employee, I find out two things. One, consumables do good work, and two, I need to remember to switch back to my heal belt. Next attempt goes smoother. I might just be learning. Out in the courtyard, I noticed something I was sure would become a recurring theme in this game. Surprise attacks. And boy was I right about that. I don't actually mind shitting my pants a little bit, keeps the wife busy, but it definitely means each area I go through, I'm checking my corners like an anxious cop. Someone called the blower in me puppet head about the boss ahead. Must be pretty scary. Nope, it's a bloke from the amusement park in Nier Automata. Right. Fight's well fun though. Nearly beat him first try. Just purely brute forcing it. I like it. It took a few goes after that because the first was clearly a fluke. But while I'm, fighting away here, let's talk about the reviews. Or at least part of it. So, while making the intro, I thought it'd be fun to blast it with all the love the game got, because as far as I saw, everyone was hyped on the game. On the back of a Google search, I found a handful of mixed through to scathing reviews, and the end of this fight kind of brings up one of the weirder critiques. It refers to the accessibility being terrible because the font used for most puppets is illegible. I find it so weird because their voices are indecipherable as well, but also this stuff is only like death victory dialogue. It isn't anything that makes or breaks the game, but it also shows that puppets are distinguishable from humans, which is kind of a story hook that the whole game has. If someone really wants to know what they say, you could screenshot the subtitles or look online. There are a ton of translation sources if that's what you want. However, after I've wrote this little bit of the script, I actually found out in New Game Plus there's an item that does the translation in game. Boy, I'm glad the journalists were really thorough and looked into that. Anyway, that aside, I got Parade Master down, but I have very clearly got a lot of learning to do. I've finally made it to Hotel Krat, where the lying mechanic is introduced. It's not a groundbreaking system, it's just a fun take on dialogue options based on the source IP, which is cool. The intro cinematic is very cool. It has a uniquely kind of Bioshock Infinite feel at first, but it also covers the story pretty well without saying a single word. Gemini is an interesting implementation, as it's a cool way to add a guide of sorts, but it is also a bridge between Disney's Jiminy Cricket and the ghost of the cricket in the original story. So after leaving the hotel, I travelled around Krat and noticed something, a grievance if you will. It's not always clear what's destructible. Like, there's some boxes that you can roll through and they crumble. Other boxes are an unstoppable force that cannot be broken. I get that some of them are suitcases and things like that, but honestly, I'd put more money on being able to roll through a suitcase than a wooden box. But then there's also like pallets against walls and things like that. Mad Donkey, my first NPC, and honestly, the experience, aside from my lack of skill, wasn't terrible. This fight was better than most of the animation reading NPCs of Elden Ring. I thought I'd see what summoning is like, assuming this would be a few attempts, so like no big deal. the summon took all the aggro and I basically just stabbed from safety. I kinda regret it because the Scrapped Watchman is a cool fight. Whoops.
You saved Geppetto. He is on the second floor. I'll use my power.
Now that I'm back at Hotel Krat, let's talk about leveling. The core stats are pretty standard. The names have just kind of been switched around. And because of that, I felt like I wasn't always 100% sure what each stat did, mostly advance. And I ended up wasting a few points in that early on. It wasn't until I got some of the status weapons, like the acid spear and such, that it actually clicked what advance was designed for. The P organ though. God, I hate that name. It sounds like I'm trying to avoid saying penis. This one is interesting. It's a bit like the moon snail in Another Crab's Treasure. It's an interesting way to add new abilities without having them like intrinsically tied to leveling or anything like that. And I actually really like that system. Not 100% sure I'm sold on the healing items being increased exclusively there, but it's not a terrible choice either. Hear a phone call and turns out it's a bloke asking riddles. That was actually super cool. Reminded me of like a less convoluted Riddler quest from the Arkham games, like a fun little side activity. And it didn't involve me actually using a whole lot of brain power because I'm working on scraps up there.
By morning, it walks on feet numbering 4. At midday, just 2. No less and no more. It walks on 3 feet when the evening arrives. And if you... Correct.
Down in Vanini's workshop, I ran into my first puppet of the future. An easy boss that was just a race to kill before the corruption got the best of me. How very Miyazaki. Fun little side note, I actually saw someone else playing this after me and found out that I could have got rid of that corruption, and does make me feel a little bit stupid. Not gonna lie. Anyway, at the end of Vanini's is Fuoco, a boss that sounds like its name belongs on a cheap chocolate wrapper. The key thing I'm learning at this point is how odd the timing is with enemies in Lies. Like, it just isn't a somewhat consistent flow like you see in many other Souls-likes. And this isn't a bad thing either. It introduces a challenge by making what is familiar unfamiliar. Fuoco is a cool boss. I gotta say, I'm shocked my Stand in the Fire and Greed play paid off. But that'll be a running theme in the future, I'm sure of it.
Puppets do this?
Now on to Moonlight Town. Visually cool, but not much to talk about. It's just harder enemies, a bunch of traps. At the end though, between me and the monorail...
So then,
mono means one, and rail means rail. And that concludes our intensive 3-week course.
The Atoned. This is kinda like an Elden Ring NPC. They seem far more erratic with less room to breathe, and the combos are just kind of really hard to spot. Really didn't care for this fight at all. Moving on, I get to a cathedral. Now, are cathedrals like a legal requirement in Souls-likes at this point? Like, I swear all of them have them. If you know of a Souls-like without a cathedral, drop it in the comments. I need to know about this. Cool, this church has an Aldrich too. How very DS3 of you. The slow introduction into carcass enemies along the way to the cathedral is actually quite cool from a story and mechanics point of view. If nothing else, it shows that NeoWiz had a really well thought out plan, which can't be said for some Souls-likes I've played. Jedi Fallen Survivor. I'd like to mention that the braziers are such a cool touch. I like that there's something to mitigate running through decay swamps over and over. Typically when you see this sort of thing in games, they're either put right at the end and you'll never have to walk through that area again anyway, or they're put before the area so you've never had to go through it, whereas this is kind of like, okay, you got through it, you survived, here's your reward, you don't have to go through that again. And I think that's, yeah, just far more rewarding. Oh, Archbishop Aldrich is an actual thing. I legit love the design though. I kind of thought all the bosses would be puppets, so seeing something that is kind of this grotesque monstrosity and religious, fantastic touch. Holy shit, this slippery bitch took me a hot minute to learn. Phase 2, like when the priest pulls out his slug, that's a pain. But I got Flame Grinder on and then just moved away from the worm, because every time you try and fight the worm end directly, it'd just fuck up my lock on. So I just stabbed the arse demon. now I'm on a pilgrimage. Apparently it didn't go well for old mate. But on a pilgrimage, a bloke might need to drop off a grumpy. But this bog isn't available. 0 out of 10, worst game ever. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Fuck this fight. Holy shit. One thing this genre struggles with is a consistent multi-enemy fight. At best, dual bosses have like an ebb and flow style that can work, or you can have relay style fights where it's a sequence of one-on-ones, and that's fine as well. But multi-boss fights are just made so much worse the more active participants there are, and trickling them in one by one doesn't really help, because in this particular instance the main boss can just close gaps like so far so quickly, so engaging in one-on-ones isn't practical. Each enemy is perfectly fine on their own, but together it takes the really tight and enjoyable combat and just makes it feel sloppy. So after a while I just got fed up with the fight, called a bro, necked the eldest easily enough. Boy, I hope this doesn't happen again. Before we move on, let's talk about an issue that is not related to bosses. Invisible walls. Like, I get that all games need walls, but an issue that Lies suffers from is walls that don't look like they should be walls. There's a few examples in this game, but this arena actually felt the most egregious. I'm fine with blocking off areas, do what you need to do, but at least make it look inaccessible. And don't get me wrong, there are tons of games that are guilty of this, but I'm just pointing this out because I noticed it on multiple occasions. Let's talk about the gold coin fruit tree. For the most part, it's currency for wish stones, which, honestly, I used like once to heal, but I found the cube pretty useless, personally, and like, I know that you can make it activate faster through the P organ, but unless it's as quick as just a normal heal, it seems largely useless for my playstyle at least. I did make use of the GCF later on in quest lines and to fix my build. It's a fun feature, but it is kind of largely forgettable, but that could also be just like my playstyle. Maybe someone else had a better experience with it. It's not a negative, but for me it's not a positive either.
Please.
Heading to Rosa Isabelle Street, home of the truest horror of this game. Babies! It's a stacked area, but not too bad aside from like the bomb throwing guys. Fuck those guys. Speaking of Rosa Isabelle though, the ambient like background music in this area is gorgeous. It's not just exclusive to this area, but this one really stands out. Oh boy, that doesn't look like a boss at all.
I dedicate this performance to my sister Annalena.
Let's talk White Lady though. Not an overly difficult boss, and it's an NPC that's easy enough to figure out. Like, perfect example of a good NPC. The part that had me gobsmacked though was the weapon break. I'm nearly halfway through the game-ish, and I'd never seen that. I genuinely think that it's a brilliant mechanic, and I would love to see it in future games. First try White Lady. Not bad. Not pretty though. Mad fucking clown puppet. I just suck so much with the timing. I think I'd have more fun learning him in an arena. But at least you can do this one-on-one in the wild. Heading into the Opera House, there's creepy new puppets, and worse still, disruption. God, disruption is arse. Well, like, only because it's like Deathblight and Curse and all that. And I don't watch bars well enough to avoid that shit. The play's pretty fucking creepy though. It was super cool to see Adelina alive. I'm so used to like the iconic people that are like referenced as pieces of lore in these sorts of games to just be long dead. So seeing her alive was rad.
Parched. Oh, thank you. I can't stop.
Okay, so I have some confessions here. This play, I only thought it existed to like taunt and antagonize P. It wasn't until I was editing this vid that I realized that they're actually explaining Geppetto's plan. I also definitely thought this was going to be the last or near last boss of the game, just based on the story implying that there was all communication coming from one point, and people talking about the King of Puppets being such a cool boss, and the name King of Puppets kind of makes you think that it's all coming to a head. I was super wrong. King of Puppets Phase 1, didn't find it too bad. Timings were all sensible, it was just learning moves, follow-ups, and attack windows. That was it. Phase 2, however, Romeo, it's the first time that you're dealing with like a fast and unrelenting boss that's not really an NPC. By the end, I wasn't terrible, but it still took a lot for me to be able to keep up with the deflects. And it feels like this is almost like the Genichiro of this game. Like, it's that point where you have to like know the basics and understand core concepts of the game to be able to progress. This fight also reminded me, while watching the footage, of a grievance in one of the negative reviews. I remember seeing someone say that they liked the stagger system but could literally never get the strong attack to stagger a boss, so it was a useless feature. Now, one thing you might notice is that I have staggered every single boss, I think. I've had no issue getting a fatal attack on them. Some are harder than others. Romeo isn't easy, and some later bosses are also problematic. Some even kind of defend themselves. But they're all far from impossible. It's just about looking at the recovery windows and knowing that it's only the last hit of a charged attack that needs to hit. All the same though, stuff like this is basic. It doesn't require a billion hours at a Miyazaki Souls-like camp. It's just about paying attention to what you're doing and not just spamming attack, attack, attack. Back to Romeo though. Very fun fight. I really enjoy getting perfect deflex against them. Top 3 lies boss, no doubt.
Incredible! You defeated the king!
A great weapon calls for a great...
I love me a scythe, and it plays into the whole technique focus. I don't think it ended up being a weapon I used in many winning runs against bosses, but my god, it was good for mobs. One thing I do appreciate is an easy to follow story. Not that the FromSoft approach is wrong, but I'm a simple man who sometimes likes his hand held when it comes to story. And this is a nice balance between storytelling in a game like Another Crab's Treasure, which is sort of a bit more basic and far more direct, and something like Elden Ring, which is told more through observation than dialogue.
I'm skeptical of the alchemists, both their science.
With that simplified storytelling, I've been pointed directly to the Grand Exhibition in search of the alchemists. Should be fine though, it's not October 11th. The Grand Exhibition has an interesting flow to it. It's a bit like Anno Londo, where the area isn't large, but there's no direct path forward, so you're kind of skirting around the outside to open access to that direct path.
Open your eyes. Gaze upon the new world.
Oh, cool. Bane. This fight would have been way easier with batarangs. All in all though, it's a fun fight, and I love the change in dynamic where you're kind of fighting someone who's just trying to punch your head in. His moveset is pretty intuitive aside from his Fury combo that just always gets me. I reckon if I spent more time, I could probably no-hit Vic. Great, so old bird is out here kill stealing. Thanks. After the fight, I went back to respec because I'm stupid. Originally I put levels in advance because I saw some blades used it, not realizing I can just change handles and it doesn't matter at all. I also didn't know how the P organ worked, and I originally put 1 quartz in each phase 1 ability because I was trying to unlock phase 2, only to find out that's not how that works. Genius. Huh, a swamp. It's interesting how this game kind of goes from civilization to backwoods shithole the whole way through. Like, you don't end up ever getting burnt out on the city life or shitholes because it sort of balances itself out. Owl Doctor. Not much to say here, just another NPC. I didn't learn them and I beat them first try. It was fine, I guess. Cool. Sends Fortress 2.0. This like bear Yaoguai thing reminds me, the addition of decapitations and things like that is such a nice touch. It feels like a fitting brutality to the world, which oddly enough is kind of missing from FromSoft games. Like Dark Souls, you could cut off tails and like there's a lot of brutality in how things appear, but like you typically don't sever limbs or decapitate bosses. There's no disembowelment, nothing like that, but this game adds that, and I'm a man who loves his gore. This bloke is what I imagine it would be like fighting a giant version of a Dark Souls main character, just with heavy load. Wow, I found a Tangela. Phase 1 was a bit of a mess. The boss is too, like, rubbery for my brain to comprehend. Like, the timing is fine, it's just the fluid motion of arms just ruins my brain. It was the same with Guardian Ape. Once I started to get the hang of the fight though, it wasn't too horrendous. And then, all of a sudden, he goes all Ned Kelly on me and puts on armor. Funny story about Phase 2. When I first started the fight, it all felt intuitive as shit, and I was like, wow, this seems so fucking familiar. Clearly the shell must have been like one of the early unique puppet enemies. It was only after watching someone do a rando run of Lies after I'd finished the game that it occurred to me that Swampy Boy was putting on the scrapped Watchman's body. I'm an idiot. Returning to Central Station was really cool. It's like coming full circle, back where it began, but it's clearly more desolate, and that change in the environment makes it feel like you've been through this huge journey. And yeah, I really enjoy it. Robber Weasel was fun to deflect his throwing knives, but I kinda sucked at the rest of the fight, and Totes would have died had I not broken his axe. I actually wrote arse here in the script. I just want viewers to know that I'm an idiot. Weasel's dying line though was really sad. I nearly had one of them emotions.
I just wanted a full belly. That's not so wrong.
Just like with the station, it's cool coming back to like Krat town in a new state. I don't know why, but it definitely feels like there has been more of a journey than there has. Because like at this point I'm only like 20 hours or so in, trying to take in as much of the game as I can, and it feels like I'm at the back end of this giant epic. So kudos on that design choice. Holy shit, it's Code Vein. This'll be fun. Nah, Walker of Illusions is fine. A good minor boss that I just kind of brute forced my way through. The corrupted parade master is actually a perfect addition to what I've been talking about, like coming back on itself. You're reintroducing an earlier boss in a new state, and it does give that sense of the game world is constantly evolving and it's moving on. It's not just that each area is sitting in a stagnant state. It was also just like a good boss fight, and it was only single phase, which at this point, very refreshing. I kind of blitzed the winning fight too, which made me feel kind of badass. Surely I won't be humbled shortly after. Oh, for fuck's sake, black rabbits again? This is nearly a better fight. The kids fight more like a 1v1 most of the time, which is cool. Once the eldest pops up though, you've got a similar scenario until it's 1v1, and then that's fine. I quite like fighting all of them, just not at once. This island is beautiful. The ergo flowing through the sky kind of reminds me of like Aurora Australis. It's just really atmospheric. Door Guardian is an interesting gimmick boss. Like, it's not super apparent, at least to me, that the exposed leg is the weak point. I would have thought that the one that's being braced was the weak one. Like, normally if you have a brace on a limb or joint, it's because it is injured. And then I also kind of thought maybe it was like you had to perfect parry the crystal arm to break that to, you know, actually do some damage. If I didn't do a cheeky Google, I'd still be trying to perfect deflect his arm to this very minute. At this point, the SSD I had Lies of P on disconnected, so the door and the enemies up here just never loaded in, and I was running around trying to figure out why I couldn't get through the door and why nothing would work. Yeah. Good times. Archabbey is alright. There's just so much running around areas that look very similar with very strong enemies around. It doesn't feel fun to explore, I guess is the easiest way to put it.
will awaken soon.
Lexasia. What can I say except she blitzed me for ages? Hands down the hardest boss in Lies of P in my opinion. Even looking back at the footage, she took longer than any other boss in the entire run. I want to say that she's kind of like the Millennia of Lies of P, but that feels unfair to Lexasia. She's very clearly a well-designed boss with some really unique mechanics, between like the lightning, the weapon break ending the phase, and the way that she's just kind of like completely unrelenting, and definitely in phase 2, it's this whole experience where you constantly feel like you're on the back foot. It's just a wholly unique experience that deserves to stand on its own. By the time I got the win, phase 1 was pretty manageable and I was sometimes able to get through a hitless. Phase 2 on the other hand, I was still getting the hang of lightning deflections and just relying on instinct to deflect her actual attacks. I kinda wish Lies had more bosses like this. Like, you'll get a little bit more from this point onwards, but at this point you're like in the home stretch. I wish there was more earlier on. So let's talk about the music here. Like, heading up to the top of the... I don't even know what the building's called. Castle? Whatever. Heading up, right to the top, the music is just so damn good.
you have, puppet of Geppetto.
Simo. I had no idea what to expect here, but thankfully his first phase is quite straightforward. Just deflect the Tesla coil and don't die.
If you want constant pain, I'm alive. Better yet, how about death?
Phase 2, on the other hand, is like frame trap paradise. It was all about not getting stuck between ranged attacks, the Hand of God, or that terrible thing like the Shadow of the Erd Tree's like Spira incantation, the thing that just spirals up off the ground. And then, yeah, basically it was just a matter of trying to make the most of what I could in Phase 2. I just put acid on my blade and just redid my face off. Worked out in the end.
And a good boy. As your reward, give me.
God
your
damn
heart,
it.
son.
Geppetto's a piece of shit. I didn't want to believe it, even though the game literally told me like 10 or more hours earlier.
I believed you were a good boy. Well, I suppose you can become a real human. Come to me, my son.
Okay, so Nameless Puppet. Now this is a valid follow-up to Laxasia. Nameless Phase 1 I actually found pretty easy. I think the health is just kind of low on that phase.
Your freedom is not for you. A coward. No. nothing more.
Phase 2 though. Jesus Christ, that Headless Wonder is relentless. This is another case like Laxasia. I kind of wished I spent longer just getting that cleaner fight. Oh well. Before covering my overall thoughts, I'd just like to point out that apparently I got the true ending purely by accident. Love to see it. Lies of P is an amazing game. While it's clearly inspired by its other contemporaries of the genre, it doesn't feel derivative at all. And that might sound weird with all my references to like Sen's Fortress, Batman Arkham Asylum, Code Vein and all that, but those are just observations. And most of them are made after recording. And like I've played a lot of Souls-likes, and many feel like they're just Dark Souls but gimmick. Lies of P doesn't. It feels like it's following some of the staples of the genre, but it's very much creating its own experience. And it incorporates like its own unique elements as well, like the whole handle to blade system, and the fact that its scaling goes purely off the handle and things like that isn't something that I've ever seen in other games before. And also, it makes really good use of looping level design, which, in all honesty, I don't think I've really seen outside of Dark Souls 1. Now, this is not to the degree that Dark Souls 1 did, like, that is a masterpiece in the way that the level design works. But it's better than Dark Souls 3, because Dark Souls 3 barely loops back on itself at all. Definitely better than Dark Souls 2 as well. It tops out, you know, most other Souls-likes, or any that I've played, as far as how the levels look back on themselves. It's really cool and really well done. If you haven't played it, and you enjoy faster paced Souls-like combat, I highly recommend picking up Lies of P. If you don't want to invest too much, it'll probably go on sale. Grab it nice and cheap and just have a good time. Cheers for watching, legends.
Je t'aime pour